Hi, NEPARC 2022 conference attendees. Unfortunately, I have COVID, which is why I am unable to join you in person, but at least I can share my research with you via this recording. So how does forestry impact redback salamanders? This is a study that I helped with during my time as an undergraduate student at Michigan Tech, which directly informs my current thesis research at Virginia Tech. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the Ecosystem Science Center, McIntyre Stennis Program, and the AFRI for funding, and of course my lovely technicians and volunteers for all their help in the field. So a little bit of background on plethodontid salamanders. They are small terrestrial woodland salamanders, and they actually don't have lungs. They breathe through their skin, and because of this, they need cool and moist conditions. As far as we know, they do most of their foraging and reproduction above ground, so things like canopy cover and forest floor disturbance can really impact these guys. And they are critical members of the forest ecosystem. They consume invertebrates, which can in turn impact leaf litter decomposition and even carbon storage. They are incredibly efficient at converting their invertebrate prey into biomass, which provides a high-quality source of protein for their predators, which include mid-sized mammals, reptiles, and birds. But they can be negatively impacted by timber harvest. Any kind of vegetation removal at all can increase the surface soil temperature, air temperature, and reduce the soil surface, leaf litter, and air moisture. And of course, these guys need cool and moist conditions for breathing and foraging above ground. So as you can imagine, this has the potential to negatively impact salamander abundance and body condition, with predicted recovery times varying from 11 to 100 years post-harvest. But we can't just do away with timber harvesting. It's very important. It forms the basis of many different local economies. For example, over 1/3 of the manufacturing jobs in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan are in the forest products industry. And timber harvesting provides a lovely renewable resource that is carbon friendly. It's much better than using like plastic. It stores carbon in those buildings with the wood that we use. And we use it for infrastructure and other wood products like paper. So before we get into the study area and the methods, here's a brief background on tip-up mounds. So natural tip-up mounds occur when wind or ice storms push over trees, pulling up the root ball. And this forms lasting pit mound topography that could be important for plant regeneration and potentially salamanders, which is important for this study. So this study took place in the Northern Hardwood Silvicultural Experiment to Enhance Diversity, also known as NHSEED, which is established in 2017 and located on the Michigan Technological University's Ford Forest in Alberta, Michigan. So prior to the experiment, the site was managed with single tree selection on a 10 to 15 year harvest cycle since 1954. And its overstory consists primarily of sugar maple. So we hypothesized that salamanders will maintain a higher relative abundance in the least disturbed overstory treatment and the control site preparation. And we predicted that the silvicultural techniques which limit canopy and forest floor disturbance will result in more relatively abundant terrestrial salamander populations. So in this study, there were 4 different overstory treatments: the clear-cut, shelterwood with low canopy cover, shelterwood with high canopy cover, and the single tree selection, or the control. And I've ordered them from highest canopy removal or highest disturbance to lowest disturbance and lowest removal. And within those 4 overstory treatments, there were 3 nested site preparation treatments: the soil scarification, artificial tip-up mounds, and the control. So similarly, these are ordered from highest to lowest disturbance. And these artificial tip-up mounds were created during harvest by pulling over 30 trees per acre, which formed this beautiful pit mound microtopography. Before we established these treatments, from June to July of 2015, we installed a grid of 21 cover boards in the center of each of the 24 treatment units. Each grid had 3 rows spaced 6 meters apart and 7 columns spaced 10 meters apart. And we left the cover boards to weather for about a year before we started sampling. So from May of 2016 until October of 2019, we conducted terrestrial salamander surveys, and we recorded salamander count and the species. To analyze this data, we created a series of negative binomial generalized linear mixed effects models and selected the best model using Akaike's information criteria. Variables in these models included salamander count, overstory treatment, site preparation, and treatment unit number. And this is the equation for our top model. And after that, we did a pairwise post hoc comparison and also generated some predictive salamander count models. So on the x-axis, we have overstory treatments, and on the y-axis, we have mean salamander count with plus and minus standard error for the error bars. Excuse me. So what's interesting about this graph is that in the single tree selection treatment, which has the lowest disturbance, salamander counts were higher in the control site preparation, which is also lowest disturbance, and this supports our hypothesis. However, in both of the shelterwood treatments, the tip-up mound site preparation hosted a significantly higher mean salamander count, which doesn't support our hypothesis since the tip-up mound treatment involves more disturbance than the control. So that was very surprising to me. And in our pairwise comparison, unsurprisingly, clear cut was significantly different from all of other overstory treatments. And for the site preparations, only scarification was significantly different from tip-up mounds. We also generated a predictive plot, which shows a consistently higher predicted number of salamanders in the tip-up mound site preparation across all overstory treatments. However, these confidence intervals overlapped the controls, so at least in the predictions, there wasn't a significant difference. So overall, all shelterwood treatments and single tree selection had a similar effect on relative salamander abundance, while a much larger removal of canopy, the clear cut, led to a decrease in relative abundance. And tip-up mounds had a significantly higher relative salamander abundance than scarification. The predictive plot showed a consistently higher salamander count in tip-up mound treatments, but these confidence intervals show that this difference was not significant. But our raw data with mean salamander count did show significantly higher mean salamander counts in the tip-up mound site preparation in the shelterwood overstory treatments. So why could tip-up mounds potentially be beneficial? It's possible that there might be something about tip-up mounds that provide a sort of refugia for salamanders that could allow them to spend more time on the surface, kind of acting as large logs that dry out more slowly than the leaf litter. So perhaps they can spend more time above ground, maybe even more time foraging. So this could potentially impact not only their surface activity, but it has the potential to impact abundance and maybe even reproduction. So it's important to mention that our findings are based on an extremely low salamander number found during surveys, and that count data is not reflective of true abundance. We're just looking at the surface activity. But despite this, our study adds to a growing body of research in this area. So our results are concordant with similar findings of short-term negative impacts of clear cutting on relative salamander abundance, such as the Tilghman 2012 meta-analysis, and a study by Ford et al. 2000, which showed no difference between salamander counts in control areas and shelterwood harvests. So other studies have had varying results depending on the latitude and site conditions, such as temperature, but results can also be impacted by small differences in the site, such as aspect, slope, soil moisture, microtopography, and in conjunction with canopy removal and forest floor disturbance, this interaction effect on salamanders is likely much more complex and nuanced. And lastly, there might be interesting interactions between salamander surface activity and tip-up mounds, but I don't think that this study had enough data to perhaps reveal these interactions, so I think that more study is warranted. So, as for management implications, forest managers might actually be able to extract a higher volume of wood using a shelterwood harvest with low residual basal area, while maintaining similar surface active salamander populations to the unharvested areas in northern hardwood forests. And timber harvest is likely not as bad as some of these studies have shown. Which leads me to my current work. So this study informs my current work to try to better understand how Tibet mounds could be impacting salamander surface activity, abundance, growth, and reproduction. And does anybody have any questions? Please do not hesitate to email me at tmengler@vt.edu or tweet me. My Twitter handle is @ToriMEngler. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.